Hi, this is our introduction to the first week in our course where we are talking about thinking critically about technology. It's my primary aim in this course for you to not only think about what your own use of technology means to you, but for you to become a good critical thinker about your own use of technology in terms of the advantages that it offers to you and possibly disadvantages that it offers to you, but also your use of technology within a social space and a relational space, and our much wider society and its impact and influence on our technology use. So as you may remember, in class, we watched a video, and if you haven't yet seen it, the video is linked in the Canvas site, Imagining a Day Without Technology. And watch the video if you haven't yet, or reflect back on that video and ask yourself about, what were people's reactions when they were invited to think about a day with technology? In what ways do people use technology? In which ways does it impact their lives? What does technology mean to them? And we heard a variety of definitions. And particularly consider the fact of, for its advantages, what were people's considerations if it wasn't there? For a lot of people, it's not a happy thought because we become so used to it. But on the other hand, the expectations that it can mean and the demands on us can also mean that it might be a nice thing to not have technology for a short time. I had asked you before the beginning of the course to answer a few questions about your own technology use. And the pie chart over here on the left is this particular class's 2020, fall of 2020 use. When I asked about using the smartphone, and there was a dead heat between those of you who felt you were addicted to your phones and those who felt you could go several days without using it. I have a reference slide from an earlier class, and I would say that this pretty much parallels what I hear from other classes, which is a little more than half of folks generally will identify feeling addicted to it, and others feel that they could give it up for several days. I wonder if this difference might be a bit of a COVID effect. So as we begin our course, I'm going to lay out what I would say, based on our literature and based on what we know about information and communication technology, some technology truths. First of all, so technology can be interpreted to mean many things. Our use of technology means different devices and applications to accomplish different functions. They are tools, after all. Our use of technology has changed dramatically over a short period of time. And by short, I can mean within a year, within 5 years, within 10 years, within 25 years. Our use of technology varies greatly by individual. This variation can mean all sorts of divides between us. It can mean an access gap. Who has access to certain technologies, who has access when, how, with whom. It can also lead to a knowledge gap in terms of what one individual gets from their technology use that another may not have, can lead to differences in what they know, what they understand, and what information they have access to. And finally, our technology use can have pros, can have benefits, as well as some consequences. So first, our technology can be interpreted to mean many things. Information and communications technology, according to Wikipedia, is an extended term for information technology, or IT, which stresses the role of unified communications and the integration of telecommunications, computers, as well as necessary enterprise software, middleware, storage, and audiovisual systems, which enable users to access, store, transmit, and manipulate information. So in this case, in our course, we're not necessarily talking about MRI machines in your car, although your car has tremendous numbers now of information and communication technologies in it. But primarily we're talking about the use of personal computers, software devices for information and communications exchange. Our use of technology means different devices to accomplish different functions. Functional uses of technology, you can step back, take a look at your phone, take a look at your computer. Just think about your day if you were without technology and what that means in terms of what functionality might be lost to you. So very obviously, we think about communication through texting, making phone calls, through information gathering, information exchange. And then we can think of possibly other categories for our use of technology. Entertainment, streaming through Netflix, playing games. We can think of technology in a form of learning management systems such as Canvas, utilities, using mapping tools, computer calculators, things like that. So there are no set functional differences. We just want to be careful that we don't have so many different ones that we can start placing multiple devices and applications in so many different categories. And the important thing is that we remember that our technology are tools to us and that they do help us fulfill a variety of important functions. So for our interest in this course, then we step back and we think about those functional aspects of technology and what that means for families. So what value is there to family well-being for technology to offer us opportunities to communicate? What benefits or consequences might it mean to families for technology to offer us information exchange and access to information? What benefits might there be to families or possible consequences related to banking, financial management, the access of health information, and private health information? So as we think very individually and very generically about technology and its functions, our interest is going to hone in then on technology use specifically for families. Also, our use of technology has changed dramatically in over a short period of time. I'm not going to go through the history of the internet and Web 1.1 and Web 1.0 and 2.0. There are plenty of places online that you can read that. It's pretty interesting stuff. And I will say also that the University of Minnesota, with its Gopher network, has been a strong contributor to the advent of the internet. But generally, what we have as for our personal computing and our access to the internet has been relatively short within the last 25 years. And if you look at any demographic reports of change in technology use over time, this will become very apparent. So this is on internet access and internet use over time, and you can see the blue is an indication of increased use over time from 1996 to 2014. And I would say too that for the last 6 years, that those numbers have continued to rise, though much smaller because we're closing in on 100%, whereas the access and rates of internet use have decreased, or people who are not using it have greatly decreased over time. We can also see differences over time in terms of device ownership. In this slide, and you'll see that a lot of my demographic slides do come from the Pew Internet and American Life Project, how between 2004, say, and 2015, changes in device ownership from, say, the tablet computer that has gone from hardly anybody using it when it was first introduced in 2010 to a rapid increase in 2015. Game consoling, MP3 players, and you can also see, and this shouldn't make a big surprise, is that when we have multiple devices all contained within our smartphones, people's individual use or individual ownership of an MP3 player, of an ebook reader, is going to decrease when they can have it all in a single device. And certainly our changes over time in terms of our using technology in the classroom. So the picture that I show you here in black and white is a traditional classroom in the 1970s. This would have been my classroom when I was in college, and you would have seen no technology in the room. The most technology you may have seen in the room at that time might have been an overhead projector. And whereas now if you go into a lecture hall, when we have the ability to meet face to face, I would see a sea of laptops. Just for this course, I've added in a most recent slide, certainly of the way that we interact and we use technology in our classroom is that technology is our classroom, and now we're using video conferencing. And so that change too has been dramatically different over time. We've also seen a heightened use of social media, and the other, and we'll get to this with individual differences, but here you can see not only a change over time from 2006 to 2016, but also differences by age groups, so that younger folks are much more likely to use social media, and older folks are less likely to use social media, although it's not that they're not using it at all. I also had asked you a question related to your use of social media. Time-wise, you can see the breakdown for 44 students in the class, with the majority of students reporting that they spend somewhere between, say, an hour to 3 hours with social media. And looking at changes by demographics too with social media users, we can see that within social media use, there are also demographic differences depending on the type of social media. Now, this is older data. This is 2012. You'll notice that TikTok isn't on here. There's still Tumblr, and which I don't think is used as much anymore, but Pinterest, Facebook, and that sort of thing. But here we see the percentage of folks who will use the particular application, but then the predominant demographic group that would be using that as well. And another question that I had asked was not just how much time you spend, but what your favorite or what types of devices you're going to be, or social media you would access most frequently. And here you can see that the three most popular from the class would be Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook, with TikTok coming in pretty closely behind. And at this point, I'm just going to pause and I'll ask you to think why. You know, what is it about these particular social media or a particular device, say your phone, or using your laptop, why do you use it? Because it not only serves a function, but there needs to be a certain functional value to it. Why, for instance, Instagram and not Pinterest? Why Snapchat and not WhatsApp? And as you begin to get an idea of value, you'll get a feeling for why certain technologies are more popular, why they continue to be more popular, and why they drive our market of technology use, not just alone, but together and as a society. One of the values that we have for social media, for instance, is our ability to connect with our networks. This is just one very small example of a social network. And so from a back end of somebody who would be studying, say, Facebook use or Pinterest use, what they're looking for is that power of the use of this technology, or the power of social media, to cluster people together. So for instance, let's say this green dot over here is you, and you use Facebook, you know, primarily with your friends. That blue cluster of dots around you as the green dot are the people that you would interact very frequently with. You're going to be, you still have that connection between, say, your cousin and your cousin's network, or let's say this is a friend of your cousin's and this is a friend of your cousin's. You still have access to that information. And let's say this is that friend of a friend of a friend of your cousin, and this is your that friend's boss, and this is their network. You can see that through the virtue of using social media and that flow of exchange of information and that sharing from this person who then shares it to this person's page, and they're reading it and they like it, which then shows up on this person's page, it eventually is going to get to you. And one of the advantage or one of the purposes of our values of social media is that it can increase people's clusters and it can bring people closer. So let's say that you're over here in this cluster and you really like what your friend of a friend of a friend of your cousins is talking about. Maybe they're an interest group and you start connecting more with them. Not only is that going to increase their group, but that's going to increase your group, and consequently it is going to bring your network closer to theirs. So the internet has great power for us to share and exchange information, not only across individuals, but across whole networks in ways that we haven't before. I have in here a link to the beginning of the movie of Crazy Rich Asians, and I encourage you to look at that if you haven't seen the film, or just to revisit this short clip from the very beginning, because it will also show you in entertaining way the rapid exchange of information, and that information is not just person to person, but it becomes very global. So the next few slides that I have is, again, the power of social media, and this is about the speed of accessing information sharing, collaboration, and contributions. And the next few slides, I think probably the next 4 or 5 slides, they're not my own. I've taken them from a slide set that was offered by the Pew Internet and American Life Project. But together, they really are a nice indication, especially if I go through them at a fairly rapid pace, for us to take a good look at for when we are involved in a major event, how quickly information can transfer. So this is an example from an event that happened back in 2016, 2013, where there was one of the many unfortunate gun shootings with an individual, 2 others, and this was a Navy, the Navy Yard in 2016, 2013. So the event happened, and immediately at 8:21 in the morning, the tweets started sharing that information. Okay. By 8:42, there were hashtags that were created. Everybody then through Twitter was talking about it, and from having the hashtag, that helped to spread information. And if somebody wanted to find that information, all they needed to do was to click on, Navy Yard shooting, and they would gather that information very rapidly. By 9 o'clock, people were sharing pictures of the event on their Twitter feeds, on their other forms of social media. And they were offering commentary with videos. In some cases, there was a video of the actual shooting that was shared. The personal tweets then give way to the news media tweets later in the morning. So now the news sources are online. They're gathering information, they're posting, so they're getting it out to their networks even more broadly. There are live feeds from the first responder scans about what happened and what the situation was like for individuals. People are then posting, "I'm fine. If I was there, this is how you can find that I'm okay." People finder sites start getting used, so they're now online. If they haven't heard from a loved one, they know their loved one was there, they can go to another source to gather information about it. They can get other people involved in helping to identify whether or not their loved one was there and involved. But if it is deemed by whatever network to be unreliable or false information, it can be shut down. Later on in the day, there's personal testimony. So in addition to objective news information, there's also personal testimony about what happened. And before the end of the day, there are memorials that have been posted then to victims of the shooting. And so within a day, I have to say that from my perspective as an older person, a digital immigrant who did not have personal computing and the internet until I was probably in my mid 30s, it is astounding to see how quickly information would be shared. In 9/11 in 2001, when the towers were hit, the primary way that we gathered information to find out what was going on was from the news media by our radio, because the internet back then was very much of just web pages. It was just a one-way source of information. The person-to-person social exchange of information was incredibly limited. And so now we have this immediate ability to share information, and in some cases to videotape the action of what's going on through, say, live Facebook Live, from having our video cameras on our phones so that we are at the scene. And so there's no question of what happened unless somebody questions the camera view or something like that. But it is incredibly quick that we can share the information. And from a critical perspective, we need to step back and ask, what does it mean for us to have the ability to engage and share information so quickly? Is it always such a positive? So I'd like you to think about, why might that not be such a positive? Why might there be some negative consequences to individuals and to families, to a community, to an administration? Then another aspect of our reasons for using technology more in this escalated of use, yes, our devices are more accessible. If we have a phone, we have a piece of technology, generally the cost has come down, unless you're Apple and then you charge lots for everything. But there are functional values to it, but there is also an institutional effort to keep us using our technology. Right? The article by Tiku that I have for you in week 1 gets at some of the addictive properties that have been programmed into our technologies to keep us using it. Bright colors, the endless scrolling, there's always more to see. It's constantly being updated. You see that little button that pops up that says, oh, there's new tweets to read, there's new information, there's new content. There'll be a green circle around somebody's face to let you know they're on right now. They're reading what you're posting. There's the gamification of the feeds. They're push notifications to reach you outside of the application to draw you back in. And so, as much as we would like to think that we have a voluntary effort around the use of technology, which technology we choose to use, how much we use it, what we use it for, what our own value for is, we also need to step back and think how much of our use or my use might be that somebody's sort of sucking me in with their algorithms to keep me there. Because don't be misled to believe that the technology companies are not out to make money. And so as they're making money from their advertisers, and as they can gather information about us to share with advertisers, or can promise a certain number of eyeballs on the feed to get to an advertiser, of course, they're going to maintain that connection. I have a video that is linked in the page of additional information for you that is from Comedy Central, and it looks at the privacy, all of the information about us that we are giving up by the use of free software. Our use of technology varies, number 4. So one of the things that we also keep our eye on is not our own individual uses, not everyone's use. I would like this graphic about Twitter. It's a little old at this point, but it still is very representative. I like it because of the different colors, and it gives you an idea that if there is a platform and there are 100 people with accounts, that doesn't mean that those 100 people are necessarily all active users. You may have 20 of those that are dead accounts, meaning the account was created and it's never been used. So it's just there. There's 50 people that maybe they'll read, right? But they're not necessarily going to be posting. There are going to be 5 people who are generating a lot of tweets, and generally those are the influencers. Those are the folks also who have a lot of people that are following them. So you get an idea that use, depending on the activity of the individuals with that application, are going to vary a great deal. And then we step back and ask why. Why within all of these accounts would some people be more active in their use? Why, for instance, if you've created a site or an account and you've let it sort of languish, why? So that gives a little bit different in perspective than on interest in use, access in use, what functionality that particular technology may have for you that it may not for somebody else. Okay. Our use of technology varies based on our ownership of various devices. We do see demographic differences, tracking our access and acquisition of smartphones, of laptops, of tablets, of MP3 players, of everything. But basically, those folks who have more money, those folks with more education, those who are younger, and those who live in more suburban and urban areas are more likely to be our technology consumers. Those who we're not seeing huge differences by race. What differences you may see by race, I would say probably are more correlated with income, education, and age and community. And then by language and ability or disability. And then I think if you ask yourself, well, what does not having as much money offer? What is not having as much education? What does living in a more rural area, what does that mean to my ability to access technology, or my interest and ability to use technology might show what some of those differences are. Okay. Okay. This variation can mean all sorts of divides in terms of an access gap and a knowledge gap. So we'll just take a second to look at this, and I'm going to stop this particular section, and we'll have a section 2. We're already close to a half an hour, and that's long enough for anybody to listen to. But the point with this one is that as we have these differences in our access and our use of technology, this also means that there is an access gap to information, to the power that technology holds, to the information that is shared through technology, which means that that those who are younger, richer, have more education, have more access to information than those who do not. So I will stop this here, and we will pick it up for part 2.